The fireplace's feeble glow created shadows on the walls of the poorly lit room. As Nathan's fingers touched hers, Charlotte, who was sitting on the edge of the couch, gasped for air. "Are you certain about this?" he inquired in a hushed, somewhat quivering voice. As she gazed into his black eyes, her pulse raced, the consequences of their decisions tumbling down all around them. She didn't respond, but she knew they had already gone too far when his lips were millimeters from hers. Charlotte hadn't given it much thought when Liam, her husband, informed her that his closest buddy Nathan would be spending a few weeks with them. Nathan was like family, after all, a constant presence in Liam's life since college. But when he arrived, something about him felt different. Nathan had always been endearing, but his demeanor had taken on a new assurance. The fragility underlying his easy grin spoke to Charlotte's innermost feelings because he had just gone through a messy breakup. At first, their interactions were casual. He'd help her with groceries or share a laugh over one of Liam's corny jokes. But as the days passed, Charlotte noticed the way his gaze lingered on her just a little too long, or how his voice softened whenever they were alone. One evening, after Liam had gone to bed early with a headache, Charlotte and Nathan found themselves in the living room, a bottle of wine between them. The fire crackled in the hearth, filling the silence with its warmth. "You've been quiet tonight," Charlotte said, pouring him another glass. Nathan smiled faintly, his gaze fixed on the flames. "Just a lot on my mind." "Want to talk about it?" He hesitated, swirling the wine in his glass. "It's nothing, really, just thinking about what could have been." Charlotte tilted her head. Her curiosity piqued. "With your ex?" "Partly," he admitted, his eyes meeting hers. "But also other things." The intensity in his gaze sent a shiver down her spine. She opened her mouth to respond, but the words caught in her throat. "Charlotte," he said softly, his voice trembling. "Can I be honest with you?" She nodded, her heart racing. "Of course." Nathan leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees. "Being here, seeing you, it's made me realize how much I've been missing. Not just in my relationship, but in my life." Her breath hitched as the space between them seemed to shrink. "Nathan," he reached out, his hand brushing hers. The contact was brief, but it sent a jolt through her, igniting something she hadn't felt in years. "I know this is wrong," he whispered, "but I can't help how I feel." Charlotte's mind raced, a whirlwind of guilt, desire, and confusion. "Liam is your best friend," she said, her voice trembling. "I know," Nathan said, his gaze steady, "and I'd never do anything to hurt him. But whatever this is between us, it's real, isn't it?" She didn't answer, but the way her fingers curled around his spoke volumes. The tension in the room was unbearable as Nathan shifted closer, his hand moving to her cheek. "Tell me to stop," he murmured, his breath warm against her skin. Charlotte closed her eyes, her resolve crumbling. "I can't." His lips met hers in a kiss that was slow, hesitant, as if testing the waters. But as their passion ignited, the kiss deepened, their restraint dissolving. Nathan's hand slid to her waist, pulling her onto his lap as the firelight danced across their entwined bodies. "You're incredible," he whispered against her lips, his voice thick with emotion. "And you're impossible," she replied, her breath hitching as his hands explored the curve of her back. Charlotte woke to the soft glow of dawn filtering through the curtains. The weight of the previous night pressed down on her as she turned to see Nathan still asleep beside her, his arm draped over her waist. For a moment, she let herself bask in the warmth of his presence, the quiet intimacy of the moment. But the sound of the shower running upstairs snapped her back to reality. Liam was awake. Panic set in as she gently slid out of bed, her movements careful not to wake Nathan. She dressed quickly, her mind racing as she tried to piece together how she'd face the day. As she stepped into the kitchen, she froze at the sight of Liam sitting at the table, a mug of coffee in his hands. His expression was calm, but there was a sharpness in his eyes that sent a chill down her spine. "Morning," he said, his tone neutral. "Morning," she replied, forcing a smile. Liam took a sip of his coffee, his gaze never leaving hers. "Nathan still asleep?" Charlotte's heart stopped, her cheeks flushing. "I think so." He set his mug down, leaning back in his chair. "You know," he began, his voice unnervingly steady, "he talks in his sleep." Her stomach dropped as his words sank in. "Liam, I can." He held up a hand, silencing her. Save it, he said, his tone sharp. I already know. Before she could respond, Nathan appeared in the doorway, his expression a mix of confusion and concern. Liam, I don't want to hear it, Liam said, standing abruptly. I trusted both of you, and this is how you repay me? The air in the kitchen grew heavy with tension as Liam's words hung between them. Nathan stood frozen in the doorway, his jaw tight, while Charlotte felt as though the walls were closing in on her. She had never seen Liam like this, his calm exterior barely concealing the storm brewing underneath. Liam, I'm sorry, Charlotte stammered, her voice trembling. It wasn't supposed to happen. It just what? Liam interrupted, his voice cutting like a knife. Just happened. That's what people always say, isn't it? Like it's some kind of accident. Nathan took a step forward, his hands raised slightly in a gesture of surrender. Liam, I know how this looks, but... You don't get to explain, Liam snapped, his voice rising. You don't get to stand there and act like you didn't know exactly what you were doing. You're supposed to be my best friend. Nathan's expression shifted, guilt and frustration warring on his face. And I am. I always have been. But... He hesitated, his gaze flicking to Charlotte before returning to Liam. But what happened wasn't about betraying you. It was about something deeper. Charlotte felt her stomach twist as both men turned their attention to her. The weight of their gazes made her knees feel weak, but she knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. Liam, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. You have to know that I never wanted to hurt you. I never planned for this to happen, but... But what? Liam demanded, his fists clenching. She took a deep breath, her eyes filling with tears. But I felt so alone for so long. You've been distant, focused on work, on everything but us. And Nathan, he made me feel seen. He made me feel alive. Liam's face twisted in anger and hurt. So it's my fault? He asked, his voice shaking. You're blaming me for this? No, she said quickly, shaking her head. I'm not blaming you. I'm just trying to explain how I got here. I'm not saying it's right. I know it's not. But I can't pretend I didn't feel something real. Nathan stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Liam, I didn't come here looking to disrupt your marriage. I came here because I needed a place to stay, and I thought I could count on you. But as I spent time with Charlotte, I realized how incredible she is. I'm not trying to justify anything, but I can't lie about what I feel. Liam's eyes narrowed, his anger flaring again. You think that makes it okay? You think your feelings give you a free pass to ruin everything? Nathan didn't flinch. No, but I think you need to ask yourself why she felt so disconnected in the first place. This isn't just about what happened last night. It's about what's been missing for a long time. Liam let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head as he ran a hand through his hair. You're unbelievable, he said, his voice low. Both of you. Acting like this is some tragic love story instead of what it really is, a betrayal. He turned toward the door, his movements abrupt. I need some air, he muttered, grabbing his coat. Don't bother being here when I get back. Charlotte's heart sank as the door slammed behind him, the sound echoing through the house. She turned to Nathan, her eyes brimming with tears. What do we do now? Nathan stepped closer, his hand gently brushing her arm. We take this one step at a time, he said softly. But no matter what happens, you're not alone in this. The hours passed in a blur as Charlotte tried to make sense of what had unfolded. Nathan stayed by her side, offering quiet support but respecting her need for space. By the time Liam returned, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the living room. He entered without a word, his expression unreadable as he looked at the two of them. I thought a lot about what you said, Liam began, his voice measured. And you're right, things haven't been okay between us for a long time, but that doesn't excuse what you did. Charlotte nodded, her throat tight. I know, she said quietly, and I'm sorry. Liam's gaze shifted to Nathan, his tone hardening. I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you for this, but I need time to figure out what comes next, for all of us. As Liam turned to head upstairs, he paused, his back still to them. And Nathan, he said, his voice carrying a hint of bitterness, if you think you're staying here another night, you're out of your mind. Nathan met Charlotte's gaze, his expression a mix of regret and determination. I'll go, he said softly, but this isn't the end. Charlotte's heart ached as she watched him leave, the weight of their choices pressing heavily on her. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same. The silence in the living room was deafening after Liam slammed the door behind him. Charlotte sat on the couch, her hands trembling as she tried to process what had just happened. Nathan stood across the room, his posture tense, his dark eyes watching her intently. "Charlotte?" he said softly, stepping closer. "Are you okay?" She looked up at him, her heart pounding. "No," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I don't know how we got here." Nathan knelt in front of her, his hands gently covering hers. "I know I should go, but I can't leave you like this, not after everything." His touch was warm, grounding, and despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. She looked into his eyes, searching for something: comfort, clarity, maybe even absolution. "Nathan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "What happens now?" Nathan hesitated, his gaze steady on hers. "What do you want to happen?" he asked, his voice low and steady. Charlotte swallowed hard, her pulse quickening. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I just know that right now, I don't want to be alone." His hand moved to her cheek, his touch tender. "You're not alone," he murmured. "You never were." The tension between them was palpable as he leaned in, their faces just inches apart. Charlotte's breath hitched, her mind racing with the weight of their choices. But when his lips brushed hers, all thoughts of consequences faded away. The kiss was slow at first, hesitant, as if testing the boundaries they were about to cross. But as their passion ignited, it deepened, their restraint crumbling under the intensity of the moment. Nathan's hand slid to her waist, pulling her closer as she wrapped her arms around his neck. "You're incredible," he murmured against her lips, his voice thick with desire. "And you're impossible," she replied, her voice trembling as her fingers tangled in his hair. Nathan stood, lifting her effortlessly into his arms as he carried her toward the couch. The room was bathed in the soft glow of the lamp, the shadows dancing across their entwined bodies as they gave in to the connection that had been simmering for days. As their passion reached its peak, the sound of a key turning in the front door froze them both in place. Charlotte's heart stopped as the door swung open, revealing Liam standing in the doorway, his eyes wide with disbelief. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of the scene hung heavy in the air as Liam's gaze flicked between them. His expression a mixture of shock, hurt, and something else, something unexpected. "I forgot my phone," he said finally, his voice flat. "Clearly I interrupted something." Charlotte scrambled to her feet, pulling a blanket around herself as Nathan stood, his hands raised slightly in a gesture of surrender. "Liam, she began, but he held up a hand to stop her. "Don't," Liam said, his tone sharp. "Don't insult me by trying to explain." But instead of leaving, Liam stepped inside, closing the door behind him. His gaze shifted to Nathan, his lips curving into a bitter smile. "So this is how it is, huh?" Nathan straightened, his jaw tightening. "It's not what it looks like." "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," Liam replied, his voice icy. Then, to Charlotte's surprise, he let out a dry laugh. "I should be furious right now, and I am, but you know what? Maybe this is what we all need." Charlotte's brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about?" Liam stepped closer, his expression softening slightly as he looked at her. "You've been unhappy for a long time, Charlotte. I see that now, and maybe I've been blind to it. But if this is what it takes to wake me up, maybe we should stop pretending." The tension in the room shifted, the atmosphere growing charged with something neither of them could name. Liam's gaze flicked between them, his expression unreadable. "Nathan," he said finally, his voice calm. "You've always been my best friend, and right now I hate you, but I also can't ignore what's happening here." Nathan frowned, his confusion evident. "What are you saying?" Liam took a deep breath, his next words coming out slow and deliberate. "I'm saying maybe there's another way to deal with this." Charlotte's heart raced as Liam stepped closer, his hand brushing hers. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam's eyes locked onto hers, a flicker of something daring in his gaze. "Maybe we stop fighting what's already happening. Maybe we see where this goes, together." The room seemed to shrink as the three of them stood there, the weight of Liam's suggestion hanging heavy in the air. Charlotte's pulse pounded as she looked between them, her mind racing with possibilities. "Are you serious?" Nathan asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Liam met his gaze evenly. I'm dead serious. Charlotte hesitated for only a moment before stepping closer, her hand brushing against Liam's. I don't know if this is crazy, she said softly, but maybe crazy is exactly what we need. As the night unfolded, boundaries blurred and emotions collided, leading them into uncharted territory. It was reckless, raw, and entirely unexpected, a night that none of them would ever forget. As dawn broke, the three of them sat in the quiet living room, the weight of the previous night settling over them. There were no words, only a shared understanding that everything had changed. And as they faced the day ahead, one thing was certain. The choices they had made would shape their futures in ways they couldn't yet imagine.